you're really curious about it. I will do my best to answer. You know, like, is it better to major in sociology or political science? You're going to make more money. Actually, the frightening thing is people actually study these things. So there is an answer. There's an answer. Except that you can't predict the future. Right? So it may have been true. It's like, you know, if you're a biologist, you're paid less than a physicist. Less famous, less important. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I got lots of things to say about it. First off, yeah, you're right about UC Berkeley. Don't go there for a conference. There's no equipment in the rooms or anything.
It's broken.
Yeah, if you can find it. But that's not my question. My question, this isn't so much a question because I just want to hear your response to this. Because when I was listening to your the description of the emergence of university rankings and how this has become an important part of thinking about education, and how it's related to this idea that the rankings became reified. But as a person on the ground in Taiwan while this happened, our perception is that rankings became important here because they served a sort of functional purpose in making the educational place a better place. Like for example, all these problems you're talking about with education, they in China or in Korea, they are a super problem here. Like SSCI publications are from God. That's
Guided missile.
Yeah, my friend who teaches somewhere, he described it as if you want to get promoted or if you want anything, they are a guided missile. Anything else might miss. As an SSCI publication will get you there. And he told me that about 10 years ago. Now, but from he was telling me this because, like me, as a person on the ground here working, the adoption of this global system solved problems that were pervasive throughout education here. Now, you might call that the diversity of education that existed here before. Okay? But for example, what I mean is, if you have students who get a PhD, even from a prestigious local university, like maybe a PhD in sociology from National Taiwan University, for example, and they're looking for a job in the local market against people who came from overseas. In the past, they stood no chance. It was very, very difficult for them to compete, even if they could publish internationally in English.
Right.
That's not the case anymore. That system, it doesn't matter who you know, what school you graduated, what department you graduated. If you can publish in the SSCI, you got your reference.
Yes.
And so for people,
Magic bullet, I guess.
Exactly.
Magic carpet.
So from a person's point, from a person on the ground's point of view, this solved a problem. I don't want to call it corruption, but
Yes.
And so in fact, I'm persuaded by what you're talking about, and I just want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, no. What you say is absolutely true. You know, it's not all bad from one perspective, right? You know, it's better than a system where the way to get a job, as it continues to be true in surprisingly many Japanese universities, for example, provide a function of graduate student is to hold your professors back. Meaning that literally you are his servant, right? So who gets to be the research assistant, called Joshu, who might then eventually become professor, assistant professor, and professor. Well, it's the one who best serves the mentor. Not necessarily the smartest one, not the one who publishes, but in the US it's called kissing ass. Brown note, same thing. Is that system great? No. I mean, I personally would have failed. I would not be in academic life if that system prevailed. Right. So from my perspective, of course, it's better. However, there are all sorts of dysfunctions at a certain high stress. So, no, I completely agree with you. And, you know, in the US, it had a very emancipatory effect. You know? So it coincided, of course, with women joining academic life, ethnic minorities joining, foreigners joining. If you look at photos of any major department at any major universities from the 1950s, it's all white men, white Americans. Some Europeans, but not many. By 21st century, 2014, it doesn't look like that. Why is that? Well, it's meritocratic in that sense. It doesn't really matter who you are. It's what you publish. You become inclusive or not. But it comes at a cost. Right? Not, the research is very good and important, and so on. It's interesting. But one truth about research, which at least in some fields, it's not true in all fields. So if you're an engineer, cell biologist, it's very different. But if you're in many areas of social science or humanities, it's different in the sense that research is a very, very lonely pursuit. As one person put it, to be a scholar means to learn to love loneliness. Meaning you spend a lot of time alone, reading, writing. I mean, maybe you read with your friends. It's very hard to read. The television on, people playing mahjong, whatever. You gotta be in a quiet place reading. Same with writing. If you don't have someone to write one letter, then you write the next letter. It's normal. And so it's bad for your social life, you know. But more importantly, it's something that will cultivate selfishness. Your students want to talk to you? No, I want to do my research. Your husband or wife wants to go out? No, I want to do my research. Your children want to play? I want to do my research. So there's a negative impact of that. And the lonely men or lonely women. But it's also that it's an institution. You know, what happens over time is that for a long time, university professors took it for granted that it was usually he older. It just stayed at the same university. You got hired at NTU, you spent 30 years, whatever, you retired. And very often you were NTU graduate. Well, in that context and trajectory, you invest in your institution. You're loyal to it because there's nothing else. So of course you may do research, but you spend a lot of time cultivating students, spending time with colleagues, getting to know them, doing a lot of service to make the university better. In the kind of global research university we're talking about, you don't necessarily invest that much in local institutions. Why? Well, it's like the new global capitalist firm. You know, people talk about Japan, but it was true even in the US. A lot of people 50 years ago just worked at one firm. You joined Ford. You stayed at Ford and retired from Ford. Right? But increasingly, in the flexible labor market, flexible employment, kind of globalized labor market, you have a lot more mobility. Why do people want to move? Well, a lot of reasons. But most importantly, you get better pay, better working conditions. Same in the university. So people keep on moving. But in order to have this mobility, what's important? Well, so for example, if you want to, I don't know, go from a respectable university to Harvard or Stanford, you get hired because they think you are a great fellow. No. They don't want a great fellow. They don't need it. Is it because you're a great teacher? No. Well, it's because you're a great researcher. Who's often not a very good teacher, and who's not a very good fellow, because you're where she spends all his or her time doing selfish stuff. And so, I mean, I understand completely what you're saying, but it doesn't solve.
I wonder what to think about the effect of this important talent. 'Cause it seems to me that if there are more and more global elites join the production of knowledge in sociology or whatever discipline, then supposedly the knowledge should become like less Americanized. But then how does that happen? Like being
Yeah,
more
no,
globalized but being more
That's a
American.
very, very good question. But let me just kind of stress the globalizing and importing talent because it's very interesting. That's a bit like baseball. 30 years ago, right? I mean, Taiwan has baseball. It's popular. And most of the players are Taiwanese in some form. In Japan, the same. There was a limit on number of foreigners. The U.S. always had more foreigners, but basically it was kind of American game with Americans playing. Well, now, as you probably know, baseball has become completely globalized in the same neighborhood. Right? I mean, most famous baseball players are not Americans. They could be from anywhere. Dominican Republic. They could be from Taiwan. They could be from Japan. I mean, it doesn't matter. But what happens? Well, Japan used to have a really strong, professional baseball. Right? They're really probably the second best in the world. But is it not strong enough? No, because all the top players play in the U.S. Why do they play in the U.S.? Well, they get a lot of money, they get a lot of prestige. I mean, it's more challenging. Calls is overdetermined. Right? Personality is overdetermined. There's so many calls. But what happens to Japanese baseball? Well, it becomes a second tier thing. Right? I mean, this is roughly what happens to universities. Yes, Japan has many outstanding scientists and scholars, no question. But where do they go if they become well known? They go to the U.S. So almost all the winners of Nobel Prize who are Japanese nationals actually work in the U.S. And recently it's true in almost every country. America wins a lot, but not because American science is great. I mean, American science education is terrible. Americans can't do that. So it's all true. Taiwanese are much better on average, but that's not the point. So there is this very, very funny impact. I mean, and it's a situation in which I'm terrible at drawing. But essentially, it used to be like this, right? There used to be kind of a hierarchy everywhere, So Japan would have a hierarchy, say at Kodai and Pub, South Korea, China, mainland China, Taiwan, around the world. And each have these kind of unique things. But increasingly, and this is analogous, not just in baseball, not just in university, but also to corporations. So now there's kind of a regional effect, right? And in terms of finance, it's probably Hong Kong now, right? And in Europe, each country used to have a great stock market, right? UK, Germany, France, and but it's all in London. And in the US, it was always New York. So if you are anyone in finance, right, the real top people are not in Japan or Seoul or Shanghai or Taipei. They're probably in Hong Kong or probably in London or New York. And so there's this kind of super hierarchy or super elite that emerges. So getting back to your question, just like in universities, they're in the top 20 to 50 universities. So getting back to your questions, you're absolutely right. It should be the case. And it does become less ethnocentric, or less particular. But instead of being substantive, it just feels more formal. Right? So it's kind of advances in methods, advances in theories that become valorized. But in that case, what happens is that the knowledge collection becomes also very ethnocentric for the reasons I mentioned before. So in the social sciences, one good way to become more formal is to be more statistical. Use the latest statistical technique. Well, how can you use the latest statistical techniques? Well, you have the latest and the best statistical data sets. Well, where do they have the best data sets? OECD countries, US, maybe Europe, a little bit East Asia. So, but the US the best. They do surveys all of things constantly. So you can use these wonderful statistical techniques because you have this wonderful, really robust data set. But then you know more and more. If you try to do data sets using Taiwanese or South Korean, of course people may say that it's very particular, countries we don't know very much about. But more importantly, the data sets are more good. There's no, large diachronic data sets. These panel data that go back decades, just what happened. And tend to be smaller. The questions tend to be slightly older, for all sorts of reasons. The kind of knowledge that you may want never get valorized, never get valorized. So you're absolutely right. It should be, and it does become less ethnocentric and nonsense, but it doesn't actually end up producing that much.
And I gather, just to keep following up, I gather that you're pessimistic about, because you could say there are more universities here in Taiwan, they're now graduating graduate students, et cetera, so you could say they're building up the base to build more local knowledge, but you don't seem so optimistic. You think it's just going to go in the direction you're saying.
How do you get articles in? In many ways, in my book, in my opinion, the single most important social theorist in the second half of the 20th century was Michel Foucault. Would Foucault have gotten tenure in the U.S.? Probably not. People always make jokes in the U.S. about how, Jesus Christ or Socrates or Plato is continue. Well, no, I mean, Socrates didn't publish it. He didn't write it. Right? So it's not, but I mean, that's, so people actually kind of get the point I make. Right? Similarly, it's not that these people create great knowledge, interesting, innovative, important work in very bizarre ways. And it's not surprising, as I keep on saying, it's true actually for classical social theory too. I mean, the guy I mentioned, Vico, was completely ignored. Didn't get a good job. Marx never got an academic job. Weber went crazy. I mean, Georg Simmel didn't get a university job really until his early 50s. I mean, partially anti-Semitism, but it's a bit more than that. So, the university has always been slightly problematic, but I think it may become even more problematic as this global. Yes?
Questions, or I think maybe making this next one. It's about agency of actors, or about the possibility to change status quo, because
yes.
I don't know how to change or even challenge at least the situation, or like the institutional I don't know how to
Isomorphism.
Yeah. It's like like professor yourself or other lots of different scholars that study of the knowledge of science. And I think their findings and your lectures can tell us something about this situation. So what is the next steps and what's your suggestion?
Yes, very good question. So, I mean, I could talk endlessly if you're interested, but, you know, essentially, there's a very, actually one of the great social scientists in the U.S. Was named Albert Hirschman. It's really important here, but he wrote a book called Things Like Voice and Loyalty. Essentially what he was saying was that in any context, he was talking about organizations. No. So just talking about any context, organization, but it's true for any context. You know, you have basically three choices. You know, you belong to a company, you belong to a university, you belong to a society, whatever. You know, by society I mean a polity. Well, if you don't like it, you can leave. You know, maybe you can go to some other university in Taiwan, or go to, you know, Malaysia, Singapore. I mean, I don't know. That's one possibility. You can always leave, right? Exit. Well, you can do the other thing and just be loyal. You can just play the game. Yeah. You get ahead. People like you, people in power. Or you can try to divorce, you can try to change. Well, how do you change? How do you do this voice? Well, you can do it, this is not Hirschman, but in general, you can do it inside or outside. So outside maybe on the exit, but a lot of people want to do outside. So just let's talk about university people in general, right? Because that's a very specific situation. Well, university people want to go outside. Well, why is that? Well, there are a number of reasons. This was my very, 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 very long and immersive engagement with academic life in many different countries for many decades now. Basically, academics are risk averse. They're afraid of the world. What do I mean by that? Well, it's a very simple thing. How do you want to be an academic? Well, I think, of course, you are not curious. Of course, you may be smart and did well in school. But fundamentally, I think that you actually are worried and scared of the outside world. So you do one thing that you have known all your life. School. More school. And you stay in school. It's not all bad. You know, I mean, again, everything I say is ambivalent in some way. I'm trying to kind of accentuate the negative here. It's great to be in school. You get long summer breaks. You can wake up late if you want. You can leave early, no one notices. I mean, you try to work for a financial company. Vacations are short. You have bosses screaming at you. You have to dress up in this heat suit. Of course, eventually. But anyway, I mean, you get my picture. So it's not all bad. So you cannot go outside. So you go inside. Well, what do people say? Well, this is again a common thing, especially in sociology, because many sociologists think of themselves as being critical. Some kind of leftist, liberal. There are exceptions, actually. I'm happy to talk about more. But by and large, in many places, it's true. Well, what do they say? Well, almost everyone I know says, well, you know what? And this is also, I mean, I'm sure you know, but I'll tell you, because in case you don't know, because it's an important tip. Almost all these major universities have what's called a tenure system. So once you get tenure, it's hard to get fired, right? You become a professor, you never get fired. You know, I mean, in the U.S., it's really incredible. I mean, I was chair of a department at Illinois when Professor Wu was there. She's not here, but and you know, there were professors, tenured professors, who would be kicked out of bars, right? Because they were drinking and getting drunk. So bars, you know, which make money by selling alcohol. They were kicking them out because they were drinking. But as chair of the department, I couldn't fire them. I mean, there was only one way to fire them in a sense, if they didn't show up to class trips. But they did show up. It's just that they were drunk. I mean, you know, in many good ways, because of women's movement and so on. I mean, the best way to get fired now is sexual harassment. But by and large, people only fired. So anyway, just keep that in mind. So the goal is that what I will do is I'm going to be quiet, keep my head down, and do what I'm supposed to do, play by the rules, get tenure, and then I'm going to wake up and show myself to be a true whatever, you know, system changer, radical, whatever. A lot of people say. Well, guess what? You spend 6 years in graduate school, maybe longer. You spend 6 years getting tenure. So you wear this mask for 12 to 15 years. That's you. Mask becomes the man. You know, you wear for that long. That's who you are. Forget what you were inside. So what happens? Well, usually what happens is occasionally there are people who have been kind of bad all along, but they made it somehow. There are always a few like that. But my increasingly pessimistic feeling, actually, about the university is that it's kind of a hopeless institution. So you're truly looking for social change, I don't think it's going to come out of it. I really don't. I could be wrong. But I don't think so. So don't look to your professors. I mean, you learn what you can from them. And certainly, I think in Taipei, Taiwan, you know, National Taiwan University, once you had a much more local or national context, it was slightly easier to do that in part. I mean, it sounds slightly demeaning to say this, but because it was a slightly a mixture of the old system and the new in Taiwan, they wanted to hire people who went to Taida, you know, something like that, but who also had this credential from outside, a major U.S. research university. And since there weren't that many people who went outside, you know, they just hired people. And so in some way, they couldn't quite control people. And, you know, U.S. Is a very, very interesting institution, but in sociology at least, it did change. I don't want to go into great details, but what's interesting is that U.S. sociology was very, very scientific until the 70s. Meaning that there was a great deal of stress and discipline in talking to discipline. And in particular, trying to make everyone do statistics, quantitative sociology, because it's the most scientific. And sure enough, if you look at, for example, funding figures from National Science Foundation, which is the major agency that gives money for social research, social science research in the U.S., the amount of funding given to sociology was actually higher than economics. until the early 70s. Why? Well, it's for the reason I mentioned very briefly. Sociology was the discipline for big data. So if you wanted someone to deal with large-scale data sets, demography, but also other things, you went to sociology. So sociology got bottom. But it was also very, very narrow. I mean, it didn't have to be, but it was. But because a lot of people who were student radicals, leftists, Marxists, feminists, liberal activists, whatever, they're all in sociology.